Welcome back to Sputnik. In my lifetime, we have gone from virtually no Indian restaurants in Britain to Indian menus which offered scampi and chips and gammon with pineapple on their back page to cater for those many people who couldn't quite handle a chicken madras. Now they're so ubiquitous that it's true that chicken tikka masala is now officially Britain's national dish.
Actually, almost none of the 12,000 Indian restaurants are Indian at all. Some are Pakistani, but the vast majority are Bangladeshi, though the cuisine is mainly from the Lahori kitchen, which is in Pakistan.
Confused? You will be unless you've already visited the exhibition at the Birmingham Museum and Arts Gallery, so successful that it's been extended. It's called Knights of the Raj, which really is the full Buna, charting the rise of a multi-billion-pound success story for small businesses, which are to be found in every city, town, and even village, from Land's End to John O'Groats. It's a confection greater than even the finest masala, and its curator is Birmingham-born artist of note, whose canvas stretches from New York to the Vatican. He is Muhammad Ali, MBE, and he's graced us with his presence today. It's quite a change for you. You're a street artist, very famous, cult, hip, to a curry exhibition in Birmingham. Tell us what took you into that hallowed hall.
Sure. The curry industry really was where it started for me. That was my livelihood. As the son of an immigrant from Bangladesh, really, I've been working in my dad's restaurant, my late father, since I was 11 years old. It was really that which made it possible for me to become an artist. I went on, and I didn't want to continue with the curry trade. It was something that I struggled with, and many people of my generation not wanting to kind of take on the business of our parents and that trade they were in. And I became a graffiti artist. You know, I started to travel and paint and build my profile as an artist. So really, I'm kind of doing a bit of a full circle. I kind of left the trade, wasn't really interested in it, but now I feel like I'm going back to try and, you know, let that inform the work that I'm doing. Tell stories is what I like to do. Giving voices to communities that, you know, do not have that voice. And as an artist, that's why I try to do, empower people through different and extraordinary new ways.
It's been a runaway success. It's been extended already. Everyone speaks so highly of it. Tell us the best bits.
You know, I remember standing on the steps of the grand launch when we had 2 months ago, and I said at the start that, you know, our parents, when they came to this country, they probably wouldn't have even thought themselves worthy of cleaning the steps of these museums, this historic building which we're in, and now they're being venerated on the walls of these galleries. Their voice has entered into these prestigious venues that absolutely must tell these stories, and putting it in such a venue and having such a wide audience for them to come and see this community that exist and they live alongside but are oblivious to their story. That for me is just magic, that we can take such a unique story of curry in Britain and how it transformed this country and actually putting that into a historic museum.
Well, you know, Mohammed, it really did transform. I mean, I grew up in a time where when you went out for a meal, it was for sausage, egg and chips with bread and butter and a pot of tea. To what do you attribute the almost insatiable taste for curry in Britain?
Well, I think it was just something new at that time, especially if we look at when this happened. This was not 60s and 70s. It goes way back to the 30s, 40s.
I was surprised to learn that from you, because certainly where I come from, there were none until the late 60s. And that will be true for most of the country. But it goes back further. Tell us.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the early single men, and my father came in the 50s, but before him, there were some that had taken on places, you know, the kind of greasy cafe type space, and slowly introduced a few dishes onto that. So they were either taking on these businesses, or, you know, they were kind of, some of them married, or some of the cases I found had married local women, and that's how they kind of, who had these cafes. And then they added these dishes, and that's where it started.
So how acceptable was it then at the time for people to eat curry?
I mean, at the time, the menu was very simple. It was chicken curry, meat curry, right? So the spices were very, and then you also couldn't get the spices like you could. So they were much blander in taste. But that's why you see things like scampi. Until this day, you still see scampi and omelets on the menus. Yeah, yeah.
Really? I thought that had
They
gone.
still have it.
When I took my mother and father to Indian restaurants, they went to the back page and ordered the scampi or the gammon, whilst I went for the piping hot.
Yeah, yeah. Even at that time, I found old menus from the 50s and 60s, and there was chow mein on the dishes. There was Chinese dishes because some of the British at the time were quite accustomed to the Chinese dishes.
Yes.
And so there was this kind of slow process. It wasn't just sudden.
Yeah.
There was this, let's get some English on there, let's get some Chinese, and slowly wean the British into kind of being a bit more experimental.
Well, it's not sudden in the lifetime of a person, but it is sudden historically. Britain had more or less the same cuisine for many centuries. Of course, the richer ate better than the poor, but now, in the space of, 60 years, 70 years, all is transformed and curry is the king. Let me ask you an often asked question of me. Why do Bangladeshis cooking Pakistani style food call themselves Indian restaurants?
It's a very complex one, right? But I think also it's because Bangladesh is relatively a new country, right?
Yeah.
So there was this kind of there was this kind of lack of confidence, really, of us asserting our Bangladeshiness, if you like. Indian, to label it Indian was quite a lazy approach to just say, oh, the British, they know Indian. And also Indian's very, the exotic. And
Quite glamorous.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because of that, we said, oh, stick to Indian. They won't know otherwise, right?
And do you as a Bangladeshi feel any slight niggle about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm totally frustrated about it. My parents, who are Bangladeshi immigrants, I absolutely want the people of my father's generation to be recognized, right? Why is it that they aren't? When people mention Bangladesh in this day and age, Bangla what? People are still a little bit, they're not familiar with it. And I feel that the transformation of British cuisine by such a community, if that community doesn't get its respect that it's deserved, my late father's efforts and his struggles and all of the things he had to put up with, and I could go into all the hardships that I've seen with my own eyes, the struggles, the racism, the prejudice, the fights, the drunkards we had to deal with, the unglamorous side of the curry trade. All of that kind of goes in vain, really, of what his life was about.
It's quite I won't call it revenge, but Britain conquered the Indian subcontinent, plundered it for centuries, stole everything they could carry. Now, you're here, number one, and you have built a phenomenal business model. I mean, these are small family businesses for the most part. Of course, the most successful ones are a bit more corporate now, but the model has been poor people arriving from Bangladesh and becoming restaurateurs and building a business that's worth many billions, at least £5 billion per annum in the British economy. That's a success story by anybody's standards.
Absolutely. People will say, and we'll hear the discourse around immigrants and sponging off the system. I tell you now, my father, I hardly saw my father because he dedicated his time day and night. And people, not just my father, of that entire generation, those immigrants worked hard to build what they have today. No one got it easy. They came, they struggled, and they went through that hardship they were visionaries. They had visions for the future of settling here, building their empires, establishing their homes and families, and educating their kids to become those leaders in the future. That's what they did. Let's not belittle them in any way. No one can, in fact. How dare anybody, in fact, belittle the efforts of a simple man selling curry? Right? I heard that growing up in school. I'd hear those jokes about curry and Ali's dad owns a curry house and whatnot. I tell you something, I couldn't really, as a child wanting to just fit in, I couldn't really hold my head up high. I didn't, Now it's about reclaiming that and say, yeah, and what?
And that's what the exhibition does.
Well, as George says, it has become a very successful industry in Britain, but I believe you're a bit concerned about this curry house.
What the British public are oblivious to, I found, certainly journeying through this exhibition, that the death of the curry house, the crisis, the curry crisis, is inevitable. They are closing down left, right, and centre due to various factors. There's, you know, the problems of staffing and bringing new staff from abroad. Tighter regulations around that means that these places can't keep running. And people are shocked at that. Really? We didn't know that there was a curry crisis?
Yeah.
There's many other factors of the costs of running these businesses, etc. But really, the high street curry house that we're so familiar with could be a thing of the past. I'm very concerned, and I'm hoping that this exhibition can tell the story, the backstory of how that curry ended up on every high street in Britain, right? People are oblivious to the stories of struggle and all of this that went into it. It didn't just appear. And I feel that this exhibition and the continued efforts, if we can mobilize and let those voices that are never heard be told, and that's how we can try and bridge the gap and maybe change things.
So let's tell the viewers again, because we're going to come up to Birmingham to see it. It's at the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and it's been extended, so it's running till when?
January the 14th. So
January the 14th. So a bit of time, but not unlimited time. You should move that around the country, you know.
That is the plan, and that is exactly what I'm doing right now. We're speaking in London. I'm going to New York, actually, believe it or not, as well. There's interest in knowing about the British curry story, even abroad.
Oh, so
right?
the British story in New York. That's
absolutely.
great.
I remember searching New York up and down the mean streets looking for an Indian restaurant 30 or 40 years ago. Muhammad Ali, MBE, it's been a pleasure talking to you
Thank you,
about
George.
Knights of the Raj.